I will say, as a holistic practitioner, and not to jinx myself, I don't find Lyme disease that difficult to treat. I know with humans and with dogs who are treated conventionally, you'll see a fair amount of relapse where they kind of seem to get better and then they get worse. I have had that occasionally with holistic treatment, but usually at some point within, maybe the first 2 or 3 months, there is a resolution to it.
Welcome back to the Crunchy Carnivore Podcast. I'm Melissa Weinhammer, and I'm here with Jessica Levy, and we are going to tackle a topic today that strikes a lot of fear into the hearts of pet owners across the globe. It's really that thing that everybody thinks of when they first find a tick on their dog. The first thing that people think of is, oh my gosh, did my dog just get Lyme?
Yep.
Lyme disease is a pretty fear-driven thing. There's a lot of fear around Lyme, and it is definitely can take its toll on health, and so we don't want to minimize that by any means. But we really just want to shed some light on the truth about the disease. How big of a risk is it? What can you do to prevent it? How do you really detect it? And some holistic perspective on what to do if you really do think that your dog did contract Lyme. So we're just going to kind of go through this topic a little bit at a time. The best place I think for us to start is to really look at what is Lyme disease. So Dr. Levy, can you just explain to everyone very simply what is Lyme disease?
Sure. Lyme disease is caused by a bacteria. The name of the bacteria is Borrelia burgdorferi. And it is a spirochete bacteria, so it's kind of shaped like a corkscrew. And it is transmitted, probably the majority is by deer ticks, which in this part of the country is a very common little critter to find. I think Lyme disease generates a lot of anxiety and fear, and I hear a lot of people say, I'm a chronic Lyme patient, or my neighbor's dog died of Lyme disease, or people have been sick with this. It turns into this chronic illness. And so that's why I think it is such a concern. And then, of course, anytime people find a tick, like even walking on their dog, that immediate thought is, what if my dog gets sick from this? And how would I know? So the common symptoms of Lyme disease are a shifting leg lameness. And what that means is that you wake up one day and your dog is limping in one of its back legs, and you're like, that's weird. Well, maybe you strained yourself on a walk yesterday, or maybe we were doing something active, or maybe you jumped off the couch wrong. And you watched your dog and you're like, well, let's see. The most common approach is, let's see if it's still there tomorrow.
Sure.
And if so, then, you'll go to the vet. And then the next day, maybe that's a little bit better. And then a day later, the dog is lame in a front leg. And that is usually the biggest clue that it is actually Lyme disease. The pain and inflammation seem to move from joint to joint. Not always. I have seen dogs who had Lyme disease who were just stiff in the pelvis or had pain in their spine. So it could show up in that way as well. But the shifting leg lameness is the most common, sometimes accompanied by fever, lethargy, loss of appetite. And so I've seen cases where the dog would normally go out in the yard and hunt squirrels and run around. And instead the dog goes out in the yard and kind of stands there. I've seen cases where normally if you start putting together the dog's food, the dog is in the kitchen like, yes, what are you doing? And instead the dog kind of stays in their dog bed, even though they're like, oh, what are you doing in there? And so it can appear in different ways. Like I said, the shifting leg lameness, sometimes accompanied by lethargy, fever, loss of appetite. And how would you know if your dog had a fever? Well, they're going to want to stay in bed. They're not going to feel great. They're not going to be as active, basically. So that's typically how you might have some inkling that your dog might have symptoms of Lyme disease.
So what is, I think what's helpful, at least for me, is when I am looking at something and I'm trying to make sure that I'm having, an appropriate perspective on it, I always like to think, okay, so what's the worst case scenario? Let me gain some perspective, okay? So let's say a dog does contract Lyme. really what is the worst case scenario for the health of that animal? Is this something that once they get it, even if they receive treatment in one way or another, they're going to be affected for the rest of their life? Is this something where if there is earlier treatment and you deal with it, they're really not going to have any effects? Is this something where it's just if it doesn't get treated, then we have a bigger problem, kind of like heartworm?
That's a good question. I don't know if anybody really knows the answer to those. I will say, as a holistic practitioner, and not to jinx myself, I don't find Lyme disease that difficult to treat. I know with humans and with dogs who are treated conventionally, you'll see a fair amount of relapse where they kind of seem to get better and then they get worse. I have had that occasionally with holistic treatment, but usually at some point within, maybe the first 2 or 3 months, there is a resolution to it. Then you think about what about Lyme nephritis? Can it get into the kidneys? What about neurological Lyme that some people talk about? And those are things that honestly, I'm just not really sure if they actually exist. There's this idea that because the bacteria is shaped like a corkscrew, so that's how it could get through the blood-brain barrier and affect the brain. But I think those are not common symptoms of Lyme disease. Can it affect the kidneys? I think the answer is just that those things are unclear. But in any case, with holistic treatment, you can still address an issue of possible Lyme disease without relying solely on one treatment.
Well, so I think that kind of helps to put it in perspective a little bit. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but we are literally dealing with a bacteria. And so, this is one of those things where the treatment you were saying is pretty effective, and it's not that difficult, especially if you have a really healthy animal and you've really built up their system for them to resolve this issue. I mean, it is a bacteria.
Right, but when you think about bacterial infections, right, it's always that interplay between the bacteria and your body. Eventually, even with the use of antibiotics, it's your immune system that has to do the work,
right,
and kind of put the bacteria back in its place.
Well, so we'll get to the treatment aspect here in just a little bit, but I think what would be the best thing for us to talk about is, what can we do to prevent the ticks from landing on our dogs in the first place, because then we avoid Lyme altogether. And so if you followed any of our stuff before, we've talked about conventional flea and tick medication. And so we're going to kind of start there and then work our way through. But for anybody who's looked at any of the packaging, the warnings, anybody that's used these products, it's not uncommon to have a very negative experience. These are highly toxic chemicals that are being put on or in to your dog. It gets into their bloodstream. These are neurotoxic chemicals. They cause seizures, let alone the damage it does on their immune system, causing allergy type symptoms, the spinning in circles. There's some pretty nasty effects from these chemicals. And so we always really, really caution anybody and say you should never ever put those in or on your dog. I don't care what kind they are, I don't care what brand it is. If it is a conventional flea or tick product, stay away from it. Would you agree?
100%.
Yeah.
It's tragic. If you just go on Facebook and look up the name of one of these chemicals, the stories that pop up just one after the other of dogs having been killed or doomed to a life of seizure medication by these chemicals. It's really a tragedy.
I mean, there's entire groups, depending on which product we're talking about, that are literally such and such product killed my dog.
100%.
And there's thousands of people in these groups. So it's really not, it's very misleading to look at these packages too where it says possible side effects. It makes it sound like it's not very common, and it's extraordinarily common. It happens all the time, and there's nothing There is nothing good that's going to come out of using those chemicals. And quite frankly, they don't prevent anything. So we've talked about this before too. You know, a lot of people put these things on their dog or give them the chewable thinking it's going to repel whatever this pest is. It doesn't repel anything.
Right.
Once the pest lands on your dog and then bites your dog and takes on some of the blood from your dog, there's toxins in your dog's bloodstream that will kill the pest. That's how they work. They don't actually repel anything. And so our aim is to obviously not harm our dog with chemicals and actually repel these pests. So, and ticks is a very good example of that, because we don't want, we don't want things like disease to come into our animals. So, Dr.
And we don't want we don't want ticks hitching a ride on our dogs and just coming into
I
the
don't
house.
even want to come in the house, thank you very much. Yeah,
exactly.
So Dr. Levy, will you share with everybody just some of our favorite, options that are not, chemical options that do a very good job of repelling?
Right, and so of course, step one is feed your dog a balanced raw diet, build that healthy dog that is going to be more resistant to parasites and less appetizing. You could stay out of places where the ticks are. So ticks, at least here in Minnesota and the upper Midwest, we have two distinct tick seasons, spring and fall. And the ticks are already out, even though there's still snow out there and it's kind of cold today, but the ticks will come out before the snow is even gone. Over the heat of the summer, ticks go through a metamorphosis, so you hardly see them. And then in the fall, you start to see the nymphs, the little tiny baby ticks come back out. And then in the fall, up until there's a hard freeze, the ticks are going to be back out. And so if you look at those seasons, that's kind of a good time to stay out of the tall grass. Keep your dog away from areas that are going to be laden with ticks. Stay out of the woods, essentially. So we can just keep our dogs away from those things. As far as things that will help to repel the ticks, Springtime makes a supplement called Bug Off Garlic. That one works really well. Amber collars, EM collars, all the different tags, the Pet Shield, the Pet Protector, the Easy Defense Tag, what's the one that Dr. Judy Morgan has on her website?
Is it the Tickless one?
Flea's Gone.
Oh, okay.
The Tickless ultrasonic device. It says on the website it repels everything for an 8-foot radius. And so that just basically keeps everything away, which is, again, that's the effect that we're looking for. Some people use essential oil sprays. There's just all sorts of different ways out there to even prevent ticks from getting on our dogs in the first place. In the other podcast episode that we did, we had a conversation about how long does it take one of these feed things or one of the topicals to kill the tick versus how long does it take a tick to transmit disease. And boy, it's kind of a battle down to the wire between those two things. Also, I don't want toxic chemicals brought into my home, whether they're coming in on my dog or oozing out through my dog's pores. No, thank you. And then, there are other ways to keep the bugs down. I know that there are, like I think Wondercide makes a yard spray. There are garlic sprays for your yard. And if you're able to, get yourself some chickens, ducks, and geese, and that will keep the bugs down like crazy. I've heard turkeys are also really good for that too.
Oh, nice. So another thing that's good to know is with these natural options, especially if you live in a more heavily, tick-populated area or insect-heavy area, you will probably need to use multiple options together. You will need to use a layered approach, which I do every year. I think I probably do 3 different things, 2 things on a regular basis, and then I have a spray that I'll use if they are going to go out into my woods or something like that. I'll spray them before they go outside, into the heavier areas, because I know there are fishermen and hunters. They like take their dogs, and so there are times where even when it's tick season, you're going to want to have your dog out there. Just know that with those types of things, you're going to really want to layer your approach as far as the repellent goes. But you absolutely can do that with all these options because they're non-toxic. So you can layer them and you can use multiple things. So let's say you do your due diligence. You've got them on a good raw diet. They're less appetizing to pests. You've got your kind of natural repellents that you really have found to be effective and they're good, but you still find a tick on your dog. You didn't catch it right away, and it's been attached to your dog. Now what do we do? Now how do we know, what's the next step, and do we have to worry about Lyme and when and all of that?
Right, and it's hard to say. I don't think anybody knows what the incubation period is, and so then the question is, because I have people who ask, like, should I take my dog in the next day and get them tested? Probably not. Like, I mean, there's probably some sort of incubation period. We don't know what it might be, but typically it takes your body a little bit of time, at least, to recognize that there's the bacteria there and to produce antibodies against it. So unfortunately, the tests that we have for Lyme disease are not great. The tabletop test, the 4DX, so that test is a really good test for heartworm. Although even there, again, you would run a confirmatory test. Don't ever accept these tests blindly. And then it also tests for Lyme, Ehrlichia, and Anaplasma. Those are 3 tick-borne disease. Those parts of the test are looking for antibodies. And basically the bluer the dot or the darker the blue, that is supposed to correlate with the level of antibodies. So if your dog has a lot of antibodies to Lyme disease and you're thinking, well, maybe this is more active infection, theoretically the blue dot should be a really dark blue. Unfortunately, that doesn't necessarily or always correlate with a confirmatory test. The confirmatory test for Lyme is called the quantitative C6. And so your vet would draw a second blood sample, send it to the lab to have this test done. And that's looking for a specific antibody against one of the proteins of the Lyme bacteria. And there too, the laboratory kind of says, well, if it's fewer than this number, we're going to say it's negative or an inactive infection. And if it's more than that number, we're going to call it an active infection that requires treatment. But even there, like, you still have to say, let's say the dot turns blue and there's something wrong with my dog. But is what's wrong with my dog Lyme disease?
Right.
And it may or may not be, even if the dot turns blue. And so that's where I find testing for Lyme disease for dogs is just as bad as it is in humans. It's hard to make that correlation. I've seen many cases where obviously people take their dog to the vet because there's something not right with it.
Sure.
And then they do the Lyme test, the dot turns blue, and the vet's like, aha, Lyme disease, antibiotics. Maybe, maybe not. Like, you still, I think, need to do your due diligence, do a good physical exam, do the rest of the blood work, like, really think, these are the dog's symptoms. Are they symptoms of Lyme disease? Or could there be something else going on and the dot turned blue? Because then you see cases where I've seen dogs come in and, like, every year the dot has turned blue and the dog is put on 30 days of antibiotics, year after year.
Even without symptoms?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
And, you know, what does that mean? What are you treating? I had somebody who came in with a dog and the dot had turned blue. They did 30 days of an antibiotic, retested. The dot was still blue, 30 days of antibiotics. And they'd been doing this for 6 months.
Oh, my goodness.
By the time they came in, dog was never had symptoms.
Never had symptoms.
There was never anything wrong with the dog. And so, like, you have to have symptoms that correlate with the blue dot in order to say, okay, yes, I accept that this is probably Lyme disease. And so I'll admit, like, a lot of the cases that I treat for Lyme disease have not gone through any kind of testing because the symptoms are fairly clear-cut. In a normal case of Lyme disease, you know what you're going to see. Is testing necessary? I think you can kind of get lost in the weeds on testing. Then there's other kinds of testing. So some people say that their dog has Lyme disease because it's been muscle tested or has had electrodermal screening, or I've seen cases where the pet psychic said that the dog had Lyme disease. I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. But in any case, I think that there have to be physical symptoms in order to say, yes, this is Lyme disease that I'm treating.
So what I'm hearing, Dr. Levy, correct me if I'm wrong, is even if the dot turns blue on this test, if the dog is not showing any symptoms, it's entirely possible that dogs can have the antibodies to the bacteria because they're fighting the bacteria, but they're not actually succumbing to Lyme disease, and their body may just take care of the bacteria without really much assistance at all. So just because the antibodies are present does not immediately mean that Lyme disease is a thing. Right.
And then the other thing that happened is several years ago, the laboratory that makes the 4DX test came out with an announcement. What? We made the test more sensitive. And that is a problem with these types of tabletop tests. You're always balancing sensitivity against specificity. The more sensitive the test, the less specific it's going to be. What that means is if the test is too sensitive, you're going to get more false positives.
Right.
You're going to pick up a lot of dogs who have some sort of antibody that cross-reacts with the test and therefore will test positive. So more dogs will be put on antibiotics than is necessary, and you'll kind of pick up a fair number of dogs who don't actually have Lyme disease. So they'll kind of be caught up in this. And honestly, I think it was just considered a win-win, right? Because you'll pick up more of the cases with Lyme disease that you might have missed if the test was too specific, and you'll sell a bunch more antibiotic. Win-win.
Okay.
So
okay.
yeah.
Okay.
And so that I think is a challenge, because it's just telling you you're going to pick up a lot more background noise in dogs that don't actually have Lyme disease and don't actually have antibodies against Lyme. So if you think about this, dogs who come in, let's say they are lame, or test positive, like what else could it be? Well, there's a lot of other tick-borne diseases out there. I've seen cases of tick paralysis. And so that's a case where it's a direct sort of an allergic reaction to the tick saliva. Tick saliva contains toxins just like all on its own.
Sure.
And so classically, the dog kind of goes down, can't walk, can't get up.
Okay.
And you look all over the dog, find the tick and remove it. And typically within 24 hours, they'll recover and they'll be able to walk again. There's not really any other treatment for it, although in the conventional world, they would probably get antibiotics anyway.
Right.
And I've had people come in with their dogs certain that the dog had Lyme disease because it's having trouble walking. But it turns out sometimes just to be anal glands.
Oh,
So-
super simple. So, wow.
Yeah, or
Okay.
like a chiropractic issue. Like there could be other reasons
Completely other thing.
why
But I
your
think-
dog is limping, walking funny, or having trouble walking.
I think when we're so afraid of something, it's like a lot of things can look like that thing that we're afraid of because we're just, the heightened sensitivity
Yes,
to doing it.
yes.
So I think one thing that's important just from a practical, because we're all about practical common sense, solutions for things, right? So I find a tick on my dog, the amount of time that it takes for a tick to transmit Lyme disease
Yeah.
is what, 48 hours, 24 hours? What is your best
I
understanding?
don't think anybody really knows.
Yeah,
I think
there's a lot of
somewhere
different information.
in that range. And then, like we looked at how long it could take the feed-through chemicals to kill the tick.
Right,
So
which
they
is
were
about
kind of
the
running.
same.
Yeah, it's about 48 hours either way. But some tick-borne diseases only take 5 hours to be transmitted. And I have met people who didn't take the tick off their dog because they had given the dog the toxic chemical, so they were like, well, that's going to kill the tick.
They're just going to let the
I'd
chemicals
have to
do
take it off.
Oh my goodness. Well, so
Yeah.
I think my point is, if you do, if you are concerned about your dog picking up ticks, or you live in a really, high tick population area, doing daily checks, just daily body checks on your dog is a huge prevention in and of itself, because if
Yeah.
you do a quick one in the morning and a quick one at night, you're catching it pretty fast if a tick's actually going to be on your dog. So that's probably step number one. And then really, if they still do get a tick and it's been attached for a little while, your best course of action is just to be observant. Okay,
Right.
I know a tick bit my dog. It might have been on for a day or more. I'm gonna watch and see if I notice anything. Just try and make it a point to not be so hypersensitive to it that you're gonna start seeing things that aren't there. Really try and be a little bit more objective and go about your business, kind of lock it away in your head. Okay, that happened on Tuesday. And then just kind of as you go through, if you start noticing some symptoms that are classic Lyme, then maybe you want to, take a little bit of action to that. But it's really that simple. Do some regular daily checks on your dogs on the body. And then, if you do happen to find a tick that's attached, remove it as quickly as you find it. And then just watch. If symptoms don't manifest, Lyme is not an issue.
There is also a laboratory that will link where you can mail in the tick.
Oh, wonderful.
And see, you can check if it's carrying Lyme. I don't know how many diseases they test for. But I know that that is available. Another thing is that if you happen to have a super short-coated dog, let's say you've been camping, let's say you went hiking in the woods, let's say you went on a nature trail, lint roller.
Oh.
Lint roll your dog before you get back in the car, and it will pick up those little ticks that are just starting to walk across your dog. So, sorry, it does not help for the big hairy ones.
Yeah, but that's a really helpful tip, though.
Yeah, because that's something that you can do like before you even get back in the car, so that you're not even bringing those ticks home with you.
Yeah, that's great. So, okay, so let's say that, people have kind of, you find a tick on your dog, you're watching, and then all of a sudden you do think, oh, I might be seeing Lyme here. I think I might have a problem. We're going to talk about the standard treatment for ticks, for Lyme disease, excuse me, and why that's really not the best option, and what is the best option.
So typically, of course, a lot of people, even just after finding a tick on their dog, think, I need to get antibiotics. The antibiotic that's used most commonly for Lyme disease and the other tick-borne diseases too is doxycycline. Doxycycline is also a powerful anti-inflammatory, so it has a strong anti-inflammatory side effect. So a lot of things get better with doxycycline, and it does not help tell you. Like you could say, well, I don't know if my dog had Lyme disease or not, but I gave him doxycycline and he got better. Yeah, that still does not mean that it was Lyme disease or any other tick-borne disease.
It could have just brought down the inflammation, which is what the Lyme would cause.
Right.
But yeah.
So the issue that I find, I think this is part of the reason, this is my opinion, undocumented. I think part of the reason that people run into things like chronic Lyme, or I see dogs with relapsing Lyme disease, I think, yes, that's what will happen if you rely on antibiotics as your treatment. So Lyme is, I think, known to create biofilm. And so I think of it as like those mylar blankets that like firefighters out in the West pull over themselves to protect themselves from fire. And so you start your dog on an antibiotic, and the spirochete, the bacteria, just goes, whoop, biofilm, can't catch me. And they essentially hide out. So many years ago, I had a Lyme researcher tell me that no matter how long you use antibiotics for, you cannot eradicate the Lyme bacteria from the body. And to me, that makes antibiotic treatment nonsensical. Like, then how do you know? How do you know if you should give it for 10 days, 2 weeks? Now 30 days has kind of become the norm. Like, what's that magic? Is that how long the bacteria lives? A month? Like, why is that the magic number? Just 'cause. I don't think it's necessarily based in anything super scientific, although I could be wrong. And so when I treat dogs for Lyme disease and other tick-borne diseases, I actually don't use antibiotics. Again, I think it provokes the bacteria into creating biofilm, and then you're going to see relapse, then you're going to see chronic symptoms, then it's going to be a lot more difficult to deal with.
It's a lot longer of a road to actually come out of.
So really it's all about, then what do you do? You deal with the immune system directly. There are supplements that will support the immune system. There are supplements that will enhance the immune system's efforts. So I use standard process canine immune system support a lot because you want that quick rise in white blood cells. You could use echinacea. Standard process makes one called echinacea C that comes in tablets. There's echinacea T. There's all sorts of options out there for that.
Now with the echinacea, because that is, it's a plant, is the standard process version a little bit more bioavailable than just giving like the echinacea tea?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and also less likely to, you don't want to push the immune system too much. So if you, for one thing, in order to get a realistic amount of echinacea tea into your dog might be difficult.
Right.
Because they'd have to drink quite a bit of it. And then also you don't want to push them into detox, which means you don't want to cause diarrhea. You don't want to push them into developing a rash. All you're trying to do is support the immune system and have it do what it is naturally going to do anyway. So you have your raw food basis, standard process canine immune system support, something like Gussie's Gut. That's a nice internal immune system support. So the Gussie's Gut supports the microbiome in the correct way. You could also use kombucha SCOBY. I use that quite a bit. SCOBY is it stands for Symbiotic Culture of Bacteria and Yeast, and that is the yellow snot-looking stuff that ferments the kombucha. It's a very broad array of bacteria and enzymes, more than you could ever find in a bottle. So that would be quite effective. I also use the standard process canine musculoskeletal support, because not only does it support the joints and the soft tissues, tendons and ligaments and the muscles themselves, but it also has boswellia in it. Boswellia is your herbal anti-inflammatory, very safe for dogs, very safe at high doses. With something like Lyme disease, you might want to try to reach a therapeutic dose, which in dogs is going to be 40 milligrams per kilogram of boswellia. Take the weight of your dog in pounds, divide by 2.2, that turns the dog into kilograms, times 40, that tells you how many milligrams of boswellia you would need to give. And that is a daily dose, and so you could split that up however you want, but boswellia is so safe. Let's say you're giving your dog 2 whatever tablets of boswellia, and you're looking at the dog and thinking, that is not enough. He's still hurting. Give more. It's super safe. I've used a lot of body work when treating dogs with Lyme disease. So massage therapy, craniosacral therapy. Maybe I've used chiropractic a little bit less because of the velocity of the adjustment. So something a little bit slower, a little bit lower intensity.
A little gentler.
Yep. Yeah. And then homeopathic remedies. So with homeopathy, we don't like to talk so much about this homeopathic remedy for that disease or for that condition. But I will say probably the most common remedies I've used for Lyme disease, rust tox. So rust toxicodendron is made from poison ivy. Bryonia is made from wild hops. Hypericum is made from St. John's wort. That's a really good remedy for spinal pain, spinal injury, nerve injury. So I would use Bryonia is an excellent remedy for any situation where movement is painful. So in a human, you would think it's the kind of headache where your headache is so bad it hurts to move your eyes. So this is the dog who is basically not getting out of bed or going out into the yard and just standing there instead of going and chasing squirrels. Rust tox is the remedy for conditions that are where you're stiff and sore when you first get up. These are the dogs that have a hard time getting up out of bed or getting up off the floor. But then kind of once you get going, you feel a little bit better, but then you start to get sore again. So it's that kind of, almost looks like arthritis kind of remedy. And then hypericum is for shooting nerve pain, so things that are kind of like sharply painful. It seems more abrupt than the other two conditions. Basically, for this kind of thing, you only need 30 C potencies. You shouldn't really need anything stronger than that. So if you have a regular homeopathic kit at home, or if you don't have a kit, but you have a health food store, they'll probably have everything you need.
And 30C is a pretty, that's probably the most common potency you're going to find if you go to your natural food store, your co-op, whatever. That's typically what they're not going to have a 200C or something like that. You'd have to go find a pharmacy and actually
and then you just give 1 or 2 pellets. Don't touch them with your hands. Just put them from the vial directly onto a little bit of something nummy. But you want the pellets to touch the inside of their mouth.
I do it directly from the inside. I'll pour them into the cap of the vial and literally just open my dog's mouth and pop them right in their mouth, and they'll swallow. They're sugar pellets for the, as far as they're concerned. They just swallow them. They're tiny.
It just depends on the dog as to whether they'll let you do that or not. And then just give it a little bit of time, and then you gauge later, did that have a positive effect, or did it have a positive effect and it wore off? Now I think I need another dose. You just kind of, there's not going to be a rote protocol for treatment because you have to wait and see what happens. And another way to that we can prevent Lyme disease is with homeopathic remedies. So the homeopathic remedy made from Borrelia burgdorferi is available through homeopathic pharmacies. The way that I typically have people use it is you'll need 4 potencies. The potency is the strength of the remedy, the dilution factor. You'll need the 30C, 200C, 1M, and 10M. And then what I have people do is, depending on when your tick season is, here we are in tick season, and it's what, mid-March? Mm-hmm. Almost middle of March. Mm-hmm. We've had an early spring this year. Mm-hmm. And so you could give 1 dose of Borrelia burgdorferi 30C on March 1st and April 1st, 1 dose of the 200C on May 1st and June 1st, and continue on through the potencies. If there's an extra month at the end, when you've already gotten to the 10M potency, just keep using the 10M once a month. What that does is it will help activate your dog's immune system so that if they are exposed to the Lyme bacteria through a tick bite, you're already in treatment mode. You're helping their immune system deal with the disease that is transmitted with the bacteria.
And we'll make sure to link a write-up and kind of layout of the remedies and where you can order them. We'll put that down below if that's something that you would like to implement in your prevention each season, so that it's just, you have something that it's easy to follow, especially if you're new to homeopathy. It can be a little confusing to hear, names and potencies. And so we'll put something in the description box down below for that. We also have an excellent parasite prevention and treatment guide where we talk about a lot of different things. We talk about all sorts of different parasites, not just ticks. And so we'll link that down below as well. Hopefully this just kind of lays it out in a little bit easier to understand way. What really is Lyme? How much do I really need to worry about it? What are some practical ways to kind of, go about my dog's life and be on the watch for it, but not be in such a state of fear about it? There's plenty of things that you can do, and I don't think, it is certainly not something that we want our dogs to get, but it's also not this big scary monster that's waiting around every blade of grass like we're kind of made to feel like it is. So Dr. Levy, do you have any final thoughts or anything else you would like to share in regards to just kind of how people maybe perceive or approach Lyme?
Well, I think obviously, in my opinion, this multimodal approach where you support the immune system, use your homeopathic remedies, use your bodywork specialists. In my experience, that is kind of the best approach. That will also prevent future relapse and really just get that dog's immune system right back on board. Of course, the prep work that we do by feeding our dogs the raw food, reestablishing normal microbiome function, having a stronger dog to start with when they encounter that tick, that's all gravy.
Well, thank you for joining us on this episode of the Crunchy Carnivore Podcast, and we will see you next time. Thank you so much for joining us. Our goal is always to encourage others to seek out the holistic approach by way of education and empowerment. You can check out our online resources at wellspringhaa.com. You can follow us on our YouTube channel, Wellspring Holistic Animal Academy, and you can also find us on Instagram at wellspring_HAA. We hope that this has been helpful and that you continue with us on your journey to holistic health for your pets. As always, we're here to be unapologetically all natural.